Get started. Good afternoon. Happy Monday. Hope everybody is well on October the 7th. And my name is Joe Swimmer. I'm the Executive Director of Episcopal Parish Network. We're very pleased to be bringing you this session on the Parochial Report and the changes that are coming to the Parochial Report as you prepare your 2025 filing. Pleased to have Molly James, the interim executive officer of General Convention, with us and her team to share with us a little bit about that work. Also want to ask you all to hold in your prayers and in your thoughts our friends and colleagues and EPN members in the affected regions that are dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane and Tropical Storm Helene, and those who are in danger from Milton, which is making its way towards the United States. So please hold all those folks in your thoughts and prayers. Then we're pleased to be hosting this today with the team here to share about the Parochial Report and the importance of the new questions and data that is being collected here. And without any further ado from me, I'm going to hand it off to Molly, who will do the introductions. And many thanks to you, Molly, and the team for joining us today.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Molly James, the Interim Executive Officer of General Convention, and one of the many things the General Convention Office does is to collect congregational data in the form of the annual Parochial Report. And so we are going to be talking today about some of the changes that are in the report that will be filed beginning in January. I'm here with my colleague in the General Convention office, Iris DiLeonardo, and with Eva Warren, who was the mastermind behind with great help from many colleagues in a wonderful collaborative process behind this new and improved, and we hope easier to complete Parochial Report. So I will turn it over to Iris for her introduction.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Iris DiLeonardo. I am the data specialist and meetings assistant for the General Convention office. Some may know me as the human form of the Parochial Report form. I create all the forms, the instructions. I manage the intake of the Parochial Reports on a diocesan level. I am, unfortunately, the one who sends out all the reminders to both dioceses and churches. As Molly said, while I may know a little bit about the Parochial Report, there is a standing committee who actually is responsible for the questions on the report. And from that committee, we have Eva Warren.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Iris and Molly. As mentioned, I was part of the group that worked on revising the Parochial Report. And I will get more in depth into the nitty-gritty of how that all happened in a second, but I'm really excited to be here and to share with all of you a little bit, with my freshly blessed cat, of course, a little bit of how we got to where we are and why we are where we are as it comes to the Parochial Report. So with that, I'm going to pull up my slides and hope that the Zoom powers that be cooperate. Okay. I will say that while I'm presenting, I cannot see the chat, but please do put any questions that come up in there, and we will address them at the end, because I know this will probably spark a lot of conversation. Thumbs up from Iris and Molly that everyone can see my screen. Great. Okay. So we're going to talk about revising the Parochial Report. I'm going to tell you a little bit about guiding principles around this process, our overall intent, and some of the key decisions that we made. I'm going to start with some necessary background because I know not everyone is perhaps as deep in the weeds as some of us are in the Parochial Report land. The first thing that you should know is that responsibility for the design of the Parochial Report rests with the House of Deputies Committee on the State of the Church. The Parochial Report is then authorized for use by Executive Council. This current iteration that we're going to talk about today was primarily designed by the Data Subcommittee of the State of the Church and the Task Force to revise the finance page of the Parochial Report. Both groups started with understanding common complaints of past iterations so that we could improve through collecting feedback from parishes and dioceses and stakeholders. The teams worked independently of each other and harmonized our suggestions at the end of the process to ensure it was kind of a coherent, cohesive document. In case you're wondering why it's me talking to you about this, I was chair of the data subcommittee. In my non-church life, I am also a doctoral candidate in sociology at The Ohio State University, studying race, discrimination, and social proximity to whiteness. As part of those studies and research, I also have advanced training in demographic theory, survey techniques, and longitudinal analysis, which pair nicely with a parochial report. But most importantly, I am a lifelong Episcopalian with a deep love for this church. Our process was pretty simple. We started by collecting feedback on past versions of the parochial report. As people were filling out the parochial report, they could send us suggestions, concerns, comments. We really wanted to make sure that we were identifying some of the points of tension in the parochial report. We then identified canonically required questions. So the parochial report, as you probably know, is a canonically required data collection endeavor, and there are some questions that we are required to include. We also did some further discernment to differentiate between questions that we like to ask and the questions that were appropriate to ask on the parochial report. There are lots of questions that we have about our church. There's lots of things that we want to know, but the parochial report isn't always the best way to get that information. We ended up with a goal of designing a new parochial report that, first and foremost, lessens the bureaucratic burden for congregations. So many folks wrote to us to tell us that the parochial report had just gotten too long, too nitty-gritty. It was becoming this behemoth that took a committee of 15 to fill out. And so that was kind of priority number one. The other things that we tried to address were designing a parochial report that helped expand our understanding of the work of the church, recognizing that doing the good work of the church isn't always bound by seats in pews on Sunday mornings. We also received feedback that there are increasingly non-traditional expressions of Episcopal community, and they wanted to make sure that they were able to fill out the parochial report for themselves in a way that really represented their community building. Of course, we wanted to be able to have some continuity of data to make sure that all the data we've collected in the past could be contextualized in our current form and allow for a longitudinal or over time understanding of the health of the church. And finally, ultimately, we wanted to make sure that the data we collected gives us the necessary information so that we can plan for the future ahead. We were very aware that we were undertaking this change at a time of transition in leadership in the church, and we wanted to make sure that we were going to equip our new presiding bishop with the tools that he might need to help us all make strategic decisions. To lessen the bureaucratic load, the first big thing we did was remove required open-ended questions. A lot of folks found those questions very, very helpful during the early stages of COVID-19, where churches were rapidly changing their approach. But over time, those questions started to become more of a burdensome obligation and less helpful. We also integrated the parochial report questions into the online parish register for easier tracking so that parishes who are using that tool are able to easily synchronize data across the two places. We partnered with CPG to supply clerical staffing information so that clergy are not having to regurgitate every single year details about their appointments in the past. We converted the service offering. So you may remember that table in the parochial report where you had to indicate how many of each thing you offered and how frequently you did. We converted that from counts to just affirmations. Do you offer this or not? And then we also synthesized the instructions that traditionally lived in the workbook into the form itself so that hopefully you can have fewer pieces of paper lying around. To expand our understanding of the work of the church, we offer optional open-ended space for parishes to share their success stories. We broadened our data collection around attendance and membership to recognize that parishes have very different situations and different congregational compositions. We strengthened our financial reporting to include increasingly common but historically unusual financial arrangements, such as parishes that maybe rent part of their property out to local groups or maybe don't have a physical plant at all and rent their own space. We also redesigned our characterization of parish health to recognize that even a small parish that maybe has a very small ASA is having an outsized impact on their community through their outreach efforts. And we really wanted to recognize that that is a sign of a healthy parish that is doing the good work. To include non-traditional forms of Episcopal community, we expanded our understandings of service and outreach to include things like counts of volunteers who maybe help out at your soup kitchen, but who aren't actually members of your parish. They're still a part of your community, even if they don't come to church on Sundays. We refined our data collection for virtual and hybrid community engagement to allow you to include those folks in your communities. Many parishes during COVID instituted online streaming and things like that. I know my parish has 2 or 3 folks who very, very faithfully attend online, and we want to make sure we recognize them as part of your community. And as churches transition in leadership and maybe don't have a full-time parish priest, we wanted to make sure that the role of lay leadership was incorporated into questions about staffing so we can better understand who's handling the day-to-day management of the parish. To allow for a longitudinal understanding of the health of the church, we preserved key questions on the parochial report that had been consistent over time. So some of the questions will look very familiar, mainly those related to average Sunday attendance and communicants in good standing. And finally, to provide the church with information necessary for future planning, we refined our financial questions to better understand the long-term financial health of our parishes. For the parishes to whom this applies, we include a few more questions about debt burdens, loans, and overall composition of endowments. We also ask parishes to share their successes so that we can learn from them. If you are doing something really amazing and exciting that gives you hope, we want to hear about it. But again, that's an optional open-ended question. We offer clear, differentiated definitions of membership and attendance categories so that when we ask you about a communicant in good standing or a member or an attendee, it's pretty clear what we're trying to get at with those questions. And then we also include some broad questions about parochial demographic characteristics. These are meant to be estimates. They are not meant to be a census of your parish, but like a little slider about the average age of your congregation. So what should you expect? The biggest thing is that this is significantly shorter than what you are used to seeing. So that's kind of the big headline news. It's a significantly shorter parochial report. It integrates directly with the online parish registers. So those of you who are already using this will find that your bureaucratic load is lessened quite considerably. And it's our intention and hope that this parochial report and filling it out offers your congregation a chance to prayerfully engage with your hopes and fears for the future of your parish, but also the future of the larger church. I'll leave you with this. Change is scary. And we do not think we achieved perfection on our first try. The parochial report is a living document, and it will continue to evolve as we further refine our data collection and analytic approach. But we hope that this is a good start. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it over to Iris to give you some of the details.
All right. I will be going over the online version of the new form. Before I do want to say that the PDF version is available on the General Convention website. I'll have Molly send that in the chat. So before we dive into the online report, I'd like to go over the requirements, how to file a report, as well as some upcoming information for our congregations. All reports must be filed online. Each congregation has login credentials. Those login credentials require an email address and a unique password. In December, the General Convention Office will send out an email with important details about the filing process, including when it will begin and what to expect. This email will provide the login names, but please note we do not ever send passwords. For security reasons, passwords are encrypted. If anyone forgets their password, they can easily reset it by using the I forgot my password link on the login page. If a congregation is missing its login credentials, we encourage them to first reach out to their diocese. If they don't receive a timely response, they are more than welcome to contact our office for assistance. We're always here and happy to help. However, just a friendly reminder that there is more diocesan staff than there are me in the General Convention office. So be patient with us, or me. To find quick reminders about the deadline or general information about the parochial report, I encourage folks to bookmark the forms and instruction page on the General Convention website. It's a quick way to find the information that you need. If you're still looking for answers, again, you're welcome to send an email to us at our email, which is reports@episcopalchurch.org. All right. So for the fun part, I'll quickly walk you through each page so you can see the updates and where to find key information to you. And let's begin sharing here. Let's see, where'd you go? Here we go. All right. So I think you should only be seeing the landing page, which is the parish report. All right, so this is the landing page for all congregations. This is where congregations want to make sure that we have the latest and up-to-date information for your congregation. This is the same as if you filed a report, this is the same as what you've seen in the past. The preparation and certification page is also the same. It has not changed from previous years, but this page again is continuing to ask congregations to provide the names and individuals who assisted with the various sections of the report. I often encourage folks to leave this page for last. The reason being is that this page, as you can see, has specific requirements. Those are those indicated in red or the asterisk. If you do not have all the information at the time that you're entering the information, it won't let you save or continue. So therefore, you could skip to the next page, and you can do that by using the left menu here. And so with that, we'll go to the next page, which is the attendance and impact page. So this is the new page or where it starts to become new to many of you. I won't go through each line of the form, but I will slowly scroll down. But then again, you can also look at the form, the PDF version on our website. Let's see. So I lost okay. So on this page, you'll see that we have some highlighted blue bubbles that will assist you in answering the question. We did this purposely so that you don't have to have the instructions or workbook side by side with when you're entering your information. So while we'll have instructions, it won't be a workbook like we have had in the past. If you have any questions, again, you can contact your diocese or you can contact our office. Okay. Oh, let's see, we scroll all the way down. Yeah, okay. And feel free to, if questions are coming along, to send them, to put them in the chat. We'll be answering those at the end of the walkthrough. And so let's go to the next page, staff, worship, and demographics. This page is also new. So again, I would ask folks to take a look at the questions and carefully review the information that we're asking. Some questions are similar to what we have asked in the past. Some are completely new. We are no longer asking for names of clergy. We're now asking for the amount of clergy and staff. We want to know who leads your primary service. We also want to know which services, programs, and initiative does your congregation have. And then lastly, we want to know if your congregation offers services in different languages. Let's see. And these are the end of that page. And then let's see. So stewardship and financial, as Eva has mentioned, is a new page. Well, new page, new questions, similarly asked questions. Again, take your time, review the questions, and I will slowly scroll down. And if any of my colleagues, Molly or Eva, want to jump in and say something on the page, please feel free to jump in.
I will just add here that the task force that worked on the finance page did a really great job giving very particular examples of strange situations. I also find them to be humorous examples in some cases because, you know, this is just the way the church works. Sometimes our financial situations are a little wonky. So I hope that you find these examples to offer some ideas of similarities or differences to your own situation to help you answer these questions.
Thank you. And then the next page is additional financial questions that we are continuing to ask. Depending on your answer, you might be asked to ask further information. Okay. And then we are on to the narrative questions. We're continuing to include a section in the report that gives congregations the opportunity to share their stories. This part is entirely optional, allowing congregations to express themselves if they wish. And the Mark Complete page. Once you've entered all the information and certified the report, the last step is to mark it complete. Marking the report complete indicates to your diocese and our office, the General Convention office, that the report is final. Once you've marked your report complete, you will no longer be able to update the information. If after marking your report complete, you do find that you've made a mistake, please ask your diocese to remove the completion mark. There is a timeline for that. After May 1, we close the site and we are on to doing our data checks and reporting for the national church. So while we can't always keep the site open, we do keep record of those updates that are submitted later after you've noticed a change or something. We do keep those. We still want them. We're just not able to update the filing site. At some point, we might figure out how to do that. But at this moment, we do that manually outside of the site. And then lastly is the download print reports. This page provides the option to download and print your report if needed. Some dioceses still do require congregations to submit hard copies with signatures on that preparation and certification page. And this feature allows you to fulfill that requirement if needed. This completes the end of the walkthrough. Thank you all for following along. If you have any questions, please do send those on the chat. We'll try to answer them next. And again, if you want to view the form, it's available on the General Convention website. And
The link is in the chat.
Yes, and the link is in the chat. Thank you,
Yep.
Molly, and I'll let
You're welcome.
Molly take it from here.
All right, so we'll go through the questions in the order I see them in the chat. We've had a couple of inquiries about the Parish Register app, and I have put a link there with more details and including a video and all of that. So hopefully that should answer your questions. And I've also put our office's email address if you have additional questions about the Register app. If you hadn't heard about the Register app, perhaps that would mean you are not subscribed to the General Convention office newsletter, or you do not regularly check the email address at which you file a parochial report. So I would encourage you to also subscribe to the General Convention office newsletter for all General Convention related news, but also wider news of interest, including things related to the parochial report. Someone asked a of are we moving away from Sunday worship to average weekly attendance? I can field that one, which is to say only sort of. In good Episcopal fashion, it's a both and. We have counted ASA for decades, if not centuries. And so we are not stopping counting the traditional ASA. We are just looking at other things, which relates to the next question of what does total impact mean? So Eva, perhaps you would like to elaborate on why you all added those additional pieces to look at total impact, which includes average Sunday attendance, but is not limited to average Sunday attendance.
Absolutely. So this is a new measure, right? We haven't included this in the past, and this is in response to a lot of feedback we received from parishes that maybe feel that ASA is not the best indicator of their health and well-being. And this is a new measure that we're hoping responds to that concern, right? I think that there are a lot of very small parishes across the Episcopal Church who maybe don't have a huge ASA, but are doing really, really good and important work. And we wanted to make sure that we were recognizing that that good and important work was still a sign of vitality, that we weren't simply setting ourselves up to live and die by ASA. In addition, we wanted to make sure that ASA stayed a pretty consistent number over time, which meant that we needed to make sure it was directly comparable to what it was 20, 30 years ago when Zoom didn't exist. And so we include in total impact numbers like streaming, right? Who's attending live, but also who watched your service a week later, right? A lot of people who choose to engage with parishes virtually do so for convenience reasons. Maybe they got to take their kid to soccer on Sunday mornings, but they still want to hear the sermon 3 days later. And so we wanted to be able to recognize that what engagement with a church looks like has changed pretty dramatically, in part due to the pandemic, but also in part to just changes that happen over time. And so total impact includes ASA because we still want to collect that number, but it also includes the online attendance. It includes weekday services. It includes recorded views. So who's watching your service a week later? And very critically, it includes outreach ministry. If you are a parish that has 5 faithful attendees on Sunday services, but those 5 attendees show up every week and feed 20 people, those 20 people you're feeding are part of your community as well, and they really measure the impact of your parish, which is why we're using that word. We also recognize that a lot of volunteers for parish ministries are not necessarily members of the parish, but they are still members of the community, and they're members of the community that you're building and nurturing in your parish. And so they're also included in that total impact number. So I think our hope is that we have some continuity with average Sunday attendance, but we're also allowing for some flexibility in the long term to start to see patterns, right? You know, if you're a campus ministry, you probably don't have a robust Sunday service separate from the service of your sponsoring parish or something like that. And so for you, average Sunday attendance might not be a useful metric, but average weekday attendance in person at your Wednesday service at 5 o'clock is the thing that matters for you. And so we want to make sure that we're giving every parish, every community an opportunity to brag about themselves a little bit and to not be forced into a mold specific to a traditional understanding of what a church has to be.
Great. Thanks, Eva. You actually answered a couple of other questions in that same bit, so appreciate that. We have a specific question about staffing, if you had regular clergy or part of the year, and which also dovetails with another question we have in there, which is like if you have contract people or 3 different people filling one role. I think we're looking for roles, not necessarily, you know, if that same role was filled by different people during the year, we're just looking at the single role there. So you would just, if you had 1 clergy person for the year, there's 1 clergy person. If you had 3 different people as your treasurer, you still just have 1 treasurer. So do that. Someone has asked if the online parish register will automatically populate the attendance information. Yes, it will. And that's part of the reason why we rolled it out, was so that it could sync directly and save you all some math on January 1st. Yes.
May I say something? I
Yes.
forgot to say a little bit about that. That wasn't available in my walkthrough, but that is because it is currently being built. So it will be available in January when filing begins for congregations.
And you will have the ability to verify and edit your data, what is imported for you. Along that line, Iris, we have a question. The financial page, will it have totals included from last year's report?
No.
And I believe the answer is no, because we're asking such different information. But as Iris did point out, there is the download and print page, so you can look back at last year's report yourself while filing it. I also like to let everybody know you can look back at your own data all the way back to 1998. So you can look at your own information for a long time, as can any diocese, and which connects to the questions about what happens to the narrative data. So obviously you can go back and look at your own narrative data, which we have now collected for multiple years in a row, as can your diocese. And there are dioceses that make use of that data. We also do a high level qualitative analysis of it. And the report of that is available on the General Convention website when we report out with Parochial Report data. We will have a report out on the 2023 data by the end of this month, and that will include some qualitative analysis at a high level of the themes in the narrative information. So that narrative information is absolutely used at multiple levels, and so it is a valuable piece to add to it. Eva, we have a question about how to provide a live online ASA if they haven't been tracking attendance throughout the year.
I would say start tracking attendance now. You've got a couple of months because these are new questions and new metrics to be tracking. We are expecting some squishiness in numbers. We've built that in for question number 5, where there's a place to add that you've estimated that number, because that's kind of the hardest one to go back and get. But I would encourage you to kind of go back through your records. If you've been live streaming on Facebook or YouTube, those records about live views will still persist, and you can go back and grab them. Not to talk up the online parish register even more, but there is space in there for you to be recording this kind of hybrid and virtual setting for services as well. So I guess my recommendation first would be to start tracking, just so you can kind of get a gut estimate. And then worst case, if you need to estimate it, you can, right? We're not going to be here being like, oh my gosh, this parish is off by 3 when we know for sure it should be 5, right? This is going to be the first year that we do this. There's going to be some growing pains. So do the best that you can. And we know that this is not going to be perfect. We're just looking for good enough.
Thank you. We've had some questions about the race and demographic information. As you all know, if you've been filling the Parochial Report out, that's been there for a couple of years now. That has been regularly requested, and people have sought to have that added. If you have the information about your congregation, and it's really the version on the 2024 report is really just an estimate. If you have that data and can complete it, great. If you don't have that data and you don't feel comfortable completing that portion of the report, you can still mark your report complete without having responded to that question. The more data, the better. So we always encourage everyone to answer as many questions as absolutely possible, but certainly understand that not everybody always has all the information for their particular congregation.
I will also add that these questions have been revised so that we don't end up in a situation where rectors feel like they have to ask invasive questions about people's backgrounds and histories. We don't want to be in that situation. They are, again, meant to be estimates. When you fill it out online, it's a slider. You put it where you think your best gut guess is. If you have a congregation of 20 people and you have an infant in that congregation, you know that you're going to be skewing a little lower on your average age of the congregation. So again, this is one of those situations where we are expecting squishy numbers. We are not looking for perfection. We're just looking to kind of get a gut check of the overall diversity of our church.
We've also had a question about all church property being held in trust for the diocese, and if a church goes under, the proceeds of the sale go to the diocese. In an instance where a church has closed, yes, the property reverts to a diocese. In terms of if an active congregation were to sell its building and move somewhere else, as long as it's an active congregation, they would retain the funds from the sale of the building to move into another building, for instance, or to rent it, say. So I think that's answering that question. If not, please feel free to pipe something else into the chat. We will put a link in to subscribe to the General Convention newsletter. To what extent are the reports of active participants and active baptized members and members in good standing held to be reliable and useful? Well, I hope very, because you all should be providing very reliable information. So I would say they're as reliable as you all put them in. I will say, in my experience, oftentimes there, can be a shift when someone new comes in or folks just engage in the annual or semi-annual every few year, actively checking their, membership rolls against who is regularly a part of the community and, mailing lists, etc. It does sometimes, I would say it's always getting more accurate. And I would hope that lots of people are providing accurate information. Eva, if someone posts their sermon in addition to the whole service, and someone just views the sermon, does that count?
That's such an interesting question. My gut instinct is that yes, it does count, because when we are looking for those after service views, we are not restricting it to solely people who sat and watched the entire thing, right? There are some people who are going to watch all the way through the start of communion and then they're going to sign off. Some churches don't offer streaming past communion. Mine certainly doesn't. So I think if people are just watching the sermon within that 1 week window, you can include them in your views.
Thank you. And I'm glad to see that the treasurer of the Episcopal Church is on this webinar and has affirmed my answer about the sale of church property. All right. And I have put the link to the e-news there in the chat. All right, now I'm going to go back up here. And just a note to say that you all have lots of great questions. And if we don't get to them all by the end of the hour today, we will respond after the fact, or you are feel free to email us as well. But we will answer the questions all. It just may not happen today. Sermons, there we go. Total impact is calculated by adding 1 through 7 and dividing by 8. Maybe we need to pull up the form again to clarify that one.
I have it pulled up and can screen share.
While you're doing that, if your technology is such that you do worship via a telephone, that would consider that online worship, somebody attending online.
Okay, so the total impact on the online form, correct me if I'm wrong, Iris, it should auto calculate this box for you. So, we can, Iris, I saw you come off of mute, so.
Yes, correct. I was just going to say that. Yes, the online. So this is, the thing about having a PDF version is that people seem to think that you can, we need to encourage you to file online, because that is the best way to help avoid miscalculations or anything in that matter. So yes, the site does calculate the totals for you.
Okay. And while that was up, just a note, that's okay. That we keep getting questions about the online piece, and the counting includes live views as well as views within a week. Is the count. So as Eva noted, to allow for the grace period of folks who may, watch, who work on Sundays and may watch Sunday worship on Tuesday, because that's their day off. So certainly wanting to incorporate folks who watch it not live as well. All right, are capital expenses defined, however? A parish defines it for capital asset reporting, or have we specified a minimum? I was gonna say, I don't think so. I mean, I think there would be a pretty universal understanding of capital expenses, i.e. expenses used for the building.
So we have a definition built into the form that I will read to you. All expenses for the purchase of property, buildings, and equipment. Report all additions to property, major repairs tending to extend the life of property, new equipment, and any other improvements or major purchases that would be capitalized in conventional accounting. Include the full cost of construction or purchase of the buildings, as well as the cost of the land. And I just also want to flag for folks that on the finance section, the definitions that we use are the standard accounting definitions that your treasurer may be more familiar with, or your accountant may be more familiar with. One of the kind of behind the scenes goal of revising the finance page was to make sure that the language we were using was consistent with kind of best practices in accounting.
Great, thank you. A question about the Register app. Can someone go back and fill it for 2023? Unfortunately, no. It launched on January 1, 2024, and you can use it for everything going forward. If you are new to the Register app and you go in now and you want to enter your Sunday services all the way back to January 2024, you certainly can do that, but you can't go back further than the 1st of January 2024. There's the complexity of tracking online attendance and streaming to multiple platforms that have slightly different ways of counting. Eva, what do we do?
This has been an ongoing problem, especially because these platforms love to change how they calculate after we've already gotten the report approved by Executive Council, but before we've launched it. And it will be, again, one of those things where we are aiming for good enough and not perfection. You will find that we are talking about unique views. That's kind of the biggest piece. So when you see that you have one viewer on Facebook, we don't want you doing any sort of, well, that one viewer might actually be this family, or I know it's this family. We're looking for unique views. So one person is one view. We also are including all viewers of a live stream, no matter for how long they stayed. So this will probably give you a little bit more of a generous estimation than people who actually stayed for the full service, right? Maybe someone saw it on their Facebook feed and they watched it for 30 seconds and they moved on. Under this calculation, we would count this. So this is going to be an overly generous count, but we know that it's overly generous, and that's kind of part of this process. We would recommend using whatever kind of built-in tool your software has. So again, this is a little easier for streaming rather than for Zoom, but if your Zoom link has kind of an attendance report, you could use that as well. But Facebook, YouTube, kind of your conventional streaming apps will have some sort of notation of how many people watched during the broadcast. And that's what we're really critically interested in. And then again, you have that kind of 1 week lag time. Unfortunately, the streamers have not cooperated with my desire for them to integrate directly with the Parochial Report. And so they have not harmonized all of their reporting. We kind of, in our best practices recommendation as a data committee, figured that whoever is filling out your parish register on, that Sunday morning does a quick check from the service last week to see how many views have accumulated in that 1 week period.
That's great. Thank you, Eva. And someone has asked if they do morning prayer online, does that count? Yes, it does. Any worship service that you all are doing online, whether it's Eucharist or not, or however, whatever worship services you all do online, you do maybe, I know a lot of parishes do Compline online. Yes, absolutely, that counts. You are gathering for worship online. Doesn't have to be regular Sunday morning Eucharist.
And this is one of those things that I think became a practice during the pandemic that has really lived on in a lot of parishes and has become a way that folks who maybe have moved away from parishes stay connected. And again, we're hoping to offer you an opportunity to show us how your congregation or who you consider your community has grown and changed. And so absolutely, please include your online morning prayer or Compline services.
Yes. Yes. And some more questions about the counting there. And yes, as Eva just noted, you are counting from Sunday to Sunday. So, presumably yesterday, someone would have logged in and looked back at the online views since the previous Sunday.
I'm just going to make a very quick addendum, which is that we are only asking for the lagged views for your main service. So if you are streaming 5 different services, love that. Super exciting. You only need to pay attention to one of them for that lagged one, whichever you consider your main service, your main Sunday service, or your main Saturday service, or your main Wednesday service, whatever is the big service for your congregation, that's the one that we want the lagged views for.
Great, thank you. And somebody was asking about a multiplier. Yes, you're right. The data counting world of online services has changed and keeps changing. So it's it's one of the reasons why we're continuing to count ASA in person as we always have, because the way we count online attendance is clearly going to continue to shift. As Eva noted, the platforms we use are not uniform and they sometimes change how they're tracking it. So we can't always know that we're getting the same data. So we're just trying, as Eva said, we're just trying to do good enough, get some data there and know that it is not as accurate. So yes, we are just going with unique views, single unique views, and not trying to multiply and figure out what that might be, sort of figuring that the combination of, 30-second views and people who stay for length of the service, it will all sort of average out. And we're just trying to get a sense of sort of how much online engagement there is, because it's really not possible to track it with the kind of specificity those of us who collect data would like. Will there be a written document with how to provide online attendance? In a sense, yes, there's detailed information on that, both in the Register app, if you're using that, and then on the form that Iris walked through online. Next to each data entry place on the form is some very detailed instructions, and there will be instructions on the website as well. And I see our treasurer weighed in with a more technical definition on capital expenses, so appreciate that very much. Thank you, Treasurer Barnes. And then we have so many parishes have created a chart of accounts that match the old parochial report. Can there be a bit more of a grace period this year as our volunteer treasurers work on this? Of course, and I think the form really is designed to be easier. So I think in many ways, whatever you had previously will still work to transfer the information. We're really not asking for different financial data. It's a sort of more aggregated way of asking it so that you have to answer, we hope, fewer questions. But really, if you've been tracking it in the old way, you will have all the data you need. Does non-capital expenses include mission? Does it include income that is be passed through to another entity? Eva is giving an emphatic nod.
I will read to you the definition. Church non-capital expenses. All church expenses incurred to operate and support ministries and programs. For most churches, this will be the larger expense line, include all expenses, including regular maintenance costs, which are not included as capital expenses on line 7. Examples of expenses to include are utilities, insurance, salaries and benefits, office expenses, disbursements to charitable organization, to the question asked, diocesan assessments, apportionment, ministry and programming expenses, and any other expense incurred to operate the church or its ministries.
Right. And I think that we've actually reached the end of the questions. Oh, I see one more that I missed back here. Gray boxes equal calculated numbers, correct? Yes, there is a point on the form where the system will do the math for you. Yay! So yes, gray boxes equal calculated numbers. Thank you for confirming that. And if you can't enter a number, that would be a clue that the form will do the calculation for you. Would a daily podcast of morning prayer be considered worship?
Love that you're offering a daily podcast of morning prayer. Under the current definitions, the answer would be no, because we are only tracking the live attendance of weekday services. We are not calculating the non-live attendance of online weekday services. And a podcast, by the nature of it being a podcast, is something that people listen to after it has been recorded.
Yes. And this is a point to say, this is the wonderful flexibility of those narrative questions, because that's a fabulous fact about your parish that you offer that daily podcast. And so when you have something to share about the ministry in your parish that doesn't otherwise fit in the form, because we make this form for 7,000 parishes, obviously it's not going to be a perfect fit for every single one. Please use the narrative section, because yes, it does get looked at, and it gets looked at your diocese, and it should get looked at by, future leadership of your congregation. So please use those narrative sections as an opportunity to tell important aspects of your parish life that are not otherwise counted or collected into the parochial report.
There are also options for text entry in our questions about programs and initiatives. So we came up with a fairly comprehensive list of programs and initiatives. but churches are creative and we could not list them all. And so there is also space there for you to offer kind of other programs or initiatives that you're offering that we just weren't creative enough to think of ourselves.
Are there any other questions out there? We'll just take a moment here to put a couple of the links back in the chat as a refresher, both to where resources can be found on the General Convention website, as well as how to sign up for our newsletter. And so we would be glad to have you that, and please feel free if you come up with a question, tomorrow or, later this week, please feel free to send us an email at reports@episcopalchurch.org. And we really appreciate everyone taking the time. And thank you for your good questions. It's nice to have so many people engaged with data and with the parochial report. So thank you all.